when I was on my mama's knee. Hey ho, Mydiddee. She rocked me like a boat at sea. Hey,
Tunny ho 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 and a bottle of rum, a vasty pieces of 8. Prepare to haul anchor and set sail, Mydiddee. Joolz Guides here, in which I wander around London and tell you fascinating facts. And it's good to be back with you again, isn't it, Simon?
It is indeed. Yeah.
Yes, marvellous. I've been away in Turkey, but I'm back now, and we're in Deptford. And it's called Deptford because of the deep ford. Just along there, we'll come to it in a minute, is the River Ravensbourne, which then comes out into the river, and there was a creek there. But anyway, Deep Ford became Deptford. Now, back in 1513, King Henry VIII established the first royal naval dockyard here in Deptford. And for the next few hundred years, great voyages of discovery set sail from henceforth, like Captain Cook, for example, who got his ships repaired here. And I just wanted to remind people that Captain Kirk and the Starship Enterprise is actually based on Captain Cook, in case you didn't know. Did you know that?
I didn't know that, and I'm actually fascinated.
Captain James Kirk of the Enterprise, Captain James Cook of the Endeavour. That's what the remit of the Endeavour was with Captain Cook. He was heading out to discover new worlds and new populations. He was the first European to chart Australia, and then he just stuck a flag down and said, yeah, we'll have this. Typical, really. 150 years ago, this would have been a hub of bustling activity with ships from all over the British Empire bringing goods back, silk and spices and all sorts. So all these buildings around here are all part of the old Royal Victualling Yard. Victuals were like food, supplies for the ships that were heading off. So Captain Cook, for example, would need supplies. Captain Bligh, before he went off on the Bounty, if you've seen my amazing film, Take Me to Pitcairn, you'll know all about Mutiny on the Bounty. He came to Deptford to refit the Bounty, to get it all sort of ship-shape before heading off on his disastrous trip to Tahiti. These are called Drake's Steps. And in 1581, Queen Elizabeth I commanded that Francis Drake's ship, the Golden Hide, be drawn into a creek near here at Deptford as a perpetual memorial for having circuited round the whole earth. They've got a replica of the Golden Hind down there near Borough Market. She banqueted on board and forthwith knighted Drake on his ship. So he became Sir Francis Drake on his ship here in Deptford. And some people claim that this was the famous location of the cloak incident where Sir Walter Raleigh laid down his cloak for Queen Elizabeth I to step on. But I heard that was in Greenwich. But some people claim that it was here, and no doubt Sir Walter Raleigh did come up these very steps. Oh, Sir Walter, really.
And every time I cried, my mama flogged me handsomely. Hey ho, shiver me, mate, the sailor I would be. Hey ho, shiver me, mate, the sailor I would be.
So it was heavily targeted in the war, but also they had these slum clearances. But luckily, these ones survived. I believe these are the ones where the naval officers stayed. If you just were looking at that, you could be in Bloomsbury or, you know, some quiet village somewhere. And then you go over there and it's right next to that.
I was nearly 10 years old. Hey ho, Mydiddee. Me pa bought me a fishing pole. Hey ho, we down. And off we went a fishing to the alehouse drinking rum. Hey ho, shiver me, mate, the sailor I...
That's what I call a bollard. 10 points for spotting one of these. That's a proper cannon. These are real cannons with real cannonballs stuck in the end, like the ones that we saw over there. I mean, look at, they're real proper ones, aren't they, these? And look, you can also see one of these wonderful Queen Victoria post boxes recessed into the wall. Is it a parish boundary marker, or is it a milestone, or is it something different? Difficult to say.
It says 1856, Deptford Turnpike Road. Rather higher than Deptford Turnpike Road.
Right.
Rather high.
But what is it?
1856.
If you lived in one of these ones up here, then when you look out your window, you get to look at this, which is rather beautiful. And those are probably much more well made as well. Less subsidence.
A loyal young man, they said, was I. Hey ho, Mydiddee. When I sailed the sea with Captain Bligh.
Whilst we're just walking along, I must implore everybody to follow me on Instagram. And my Instagram got deleted. And I had 10,000 followers and it got deleted. So yeah, so please, pretty please, with the cherry on top, it doesn't cost anything. If you've got an Instagram account and you like Joolz Guides, please follow me on the new account, which is @Joolz Guides Official.
It's What's irritating me, these lamp poles, they're purposefully on the angle. I thought, because when we were back there, I thought it was because someone had, you know, knocked into it, but no, they're all like that.
That is so weird, you're right. Just over here is Peeps Park, and it's named after Samuel Pepys, who used to come and visit Deptford quite often. If you read his diaries, he's always heading down to Deptford in his capacity as a clerk of the Navy Board, whatever that is. He was a bit of a bounder and a cad, was old Samuel Pepys. He used to come down here and visit Mrs. Bagwell at her home. She was the wife of a ship's carpenter. He writes, young Bagwell and his wife waylaid me to desire a favour about getting him a better ship, which I shall pretend to be willing to do for them, but my mind is to know his wife a little better. Finally, I had my way with her. His poor old wife was a bit of a martyr. I can't believe he wrote this in his diary, but who would write that in their diary and keep it under their bed? Amazing that his wife didn't find it. But originally, this used to be Sayes Court, this big residence, owned by John Evelyn, another famous diarist, although we've never heard of him. Now it's just this ugly big development, but he had this huge house with beautiful ornate gardens, and he had many magnificent guests here, whom we will get to later. That's why you've got Evelyn Street named after John Evelyn and Sayes Court Park, where we're going now.
I made it back to dry land with a tale to tell or two. Hey ho, shiver me, make the sailor through and through. Hey ho, shiver me, make the sailor.
This over here is Sayes Court Park, named after the huge estate that John Evelyn lived in, which would have been just over the back of that fence over there. But this tree over here, mulberry tree, they say that it was planted by Tsar Peter the Great, who was a guest here, and it's 300 years old. Other people just say it was planted around that time by somebody else, but if it's good enough for Deptford Council, it's good enough for me. Here we go round the mulberry bush, the mulberry bush, the mulberry bush. Here we go round the mulberry bush on a cold and frosty morning.
Quite like this little area. And these 70s, 60s, 70s estates and whatnot. I love it actually.
I want to show you my old street sign.
Which one? No, that's not an old one.
It is. Look, the one above it. I'm not looking at that one. I'm looking at
Oh,
Look,
yes,
well,
you're
that's
right. She
amazing.
spotted it. Yes,
That's
yes.
not even
5 points to Louisa. Because look at the old Hyde Street, original street sign up there. All right, you have to go completely mental. Opposite that, Albury Street. This is, we don't need to go down there, but this is where all the old sea captains' houses were. All those ones down there on the left. Who knows, maybe Captain Cookie himself stayed there when he was staying in Deptford. Although he actually lived just across the river, pretty close. This is Deptford Station, look. Deptford Station opened in 1836, and the first railway in London was along this viaduct up here. It was, it went from London Bridge down to Greenwich. Excuse me. Not in your way, was I?
There's only one lady I'll never forget. Pandora tangled me up in her net.
This is Deptford High Street. At the end there is New Cross Road, which is, I think, the A2. Is it the A2? I don't know. I think it's the A2. Used to be Watling Street back in Roman times, and that was the road that, in Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, pilgrims would start down there near London Bridge, and they would go along there to Canterbury. Interestingly, did you know that the word canter, to canter on a horse, comes from the word Canterbury, because it was a comfortable pace for pilgrims on their way to Canterbury to ride a horse. So that's why it's called cantering.
Are you cantering down there? Or
Yeah, we'll
Have
canter
a
off
bit of
down there.
banter whilst we canter.
She captured us soul, she stole us away. She led me home, but led others.
Just to point out this mural here, Deptford as a naval hub. The HMS Cambridge launched Deptford dockyard in 1755, and the other ship there, all the guns, is the Royal George. The Royal George, they put it onto its side to repair it, and then all this water gushed into it and it sunk. It turned out to be one of the biggest naval disasters in British waters of all time. And they salvaged some of the cannon from it, and they turned them into the bas-reliefs at the bottom of Nelson's Column. Wow. Other stupid tour guides will tell you, like me, that they were actually cast from guns captured at the Battle of Trafalgar, but they weren't. A pox on me for a clumsy fool for telling you so. It was the Royal George.
Do you think anyone in the future is going to pick up the fact that you're calling that a mural and it's actually a print?
You're right, it's a print.
Some of us were hanged, some of us set free. Pandora, Pandora, the witch of the sea.
This is St. Paul's, one of these 18th century churches. And there's a little memorial to one of the first Tahitians to visit London. He's called Mydiddee, because when Captain Bligh, I'm completely obsessed with the Mutiny on the Bounty. A lot of people don't realise that Captain Bligh, he's most famous for the Mutiny on the Bounty and everything going wrong, but he actually went back to Tahiti on a second mission in 1793 to go and collect more breadfruit, because that was his original mission. On his way back, he brought with him a guest from Tahiti called Mydiddee. Mydiddee, when he first arrived sailing up the Thames, he was completely shocked by all these miscreants and criminals who were hanging in gibbets. He thought it was terribly barbaric. Poor fella, he didn't last very long himself. He died from a misguided attempt to inoculate him against smallpox.
A vaccination?
A vaccination, yes. No, please don't bring up vaccinations. I don't want lots of people to write in. And all they ended up doing was actually giving him smallpox, so the poor fella died. And Captain Bligh paid to have a memorial and a tomb put in this church for him. But sadly, they didn't put it up, even though he paid for it, until recently.
We stole the bounty in 1789. Pandora caught up with us.
Mydiddee, a native of Tahiti, sailed to England with Captain Bligh on HMS Providence, died in Deptford.
Hello, you're the rector here
I'm
at
the
St.
rector.
Paul's.
I'm Father Paul Butler.
I often see these gravestones around the edge of a churchyard.
Yeah.
Does that mean that they've actually cleared the bodies out?
No, the bodies are here. An Act of Parliament was made in the early part of the 20th century to enable churchyards in populous places to make their spaces a bit more like open green spaces for people. So the gravestones normally indicate that a space has been reused above ground, but the bodies are normally still there below ground. For example, in this church, there's a crypt below. Crypts were often built in the 18th century with new churches so that the rich could be buried rather than dug up and taken to Guy's or Thomas's for, shall we say, illegal medical research.
By the resurrection men. Yeah. Drench the steeples, drown the cocks. This is the cock that crowed in the morn, that woke the priest all shaven and shorn.
This is the priest all shaven and shorn.
Who married the man.
Married the maiden.
He married the man all tattered and torn, that kissed the maiden all forlorn, that built the cat with the crumpled horn, that tossed the dog, the word the cat, that killed the rat, that ate the malt, the maiden, the house cat.
And I prayed that blood would not die in vain. And I prayed that Christian...
Through here, you see that house over, that's called Farah House, and at number 1 is where Dire Straits was formed. That's where Mark Knopfler lived, in the house just at the end. Yeah,
I thought they were all northerners.
yeah, they're from Newcastle.
It was the first CD to sell 1 million copies, the Brothers in Arms.
Yeah, it was so popular.
Because the CD came onto the market, and I think Philips brought out, the CD player, and that was one of the first albums.
That's Mark Knopfler's house over there, and I just want to say hello to my friend Lace in Brazil, because she's a massive Dire Straits fan. So there it is, Lace, there it is. Shall I do a bit like a BBC presenter? Here at the Ravensbourne River, we have an old Victorian piece of engineering called Halfpenny Hatch.
That's more than BBC 1950s, so I was thinking like now. Here we are in this wonderful urban setting, and it's today that we celebrate the diversity and also the beautiful nature of the people in this community. Oh, I think I see someone over there. Come on, let's talk to them.
Well, look at this there. This is the Ravensbourne River coming up here into the creek there. Now, look, that building you can see just through there is one of Sir Joseph Bazalgette's pumping stations. You know, after the big stink in the 1850s, was it? They had this terribly hot summer, and the whole of the River Thames was smelling so much, so they said to Joseph Bazalgette, he had this big beard like Lemmy from Motorhead, can you sort out all this smell for us? And so he decided to build the sewers, huge sewers. Anyway, part of it was that building there which pumps all the poos and everything, God knows where, down to the sewage treatment works or something. But right here you've got this thing called Halfpenny Hatch. And it's called Halfpenny Hatch because it cost a halfpenny, a halfpenny, in order to have it open. So the train would have to stop there, and if a big ship came past, and they wanted to, it was too big to get under the bridge. They'd lift up that section of track. Look, it's amazing that whole section there lifted up. Look, up those runners, you can see. So there was these blokes, 8 blokes would, I don't know, use some winch hooks or something. They'd raise it up and up it would go. And
they not do it anymore?
well, I don't think so. I mean, it looks like this bit does kind of come up itself, just in case. I dare say they can if they need to, but there's not much call for it these days. Over here is the Trinity Laban Conservatoire of Music and Dance. I know that because it says it. But yeah, Laban, he was the guy who actually invented modern dance, where they paint each other funny colours and sort of lie around in leotards. You know, modern...
Yeah, abstract dance.
The medium of modern abstract dance. The building itself won some architectural prize. In seafaring, dancing was very good for morale. Captain Bligh, who I keep talking about because I'm obsessed with the Mutiny on the Bounty, he mentions it in his logbook. After 4 o'clock is laid aside for their amusement and dancing. I had great difficulty before I left England to get a man to play the violin, and I preferred at last to take one 2/3 blind than to come without one. He describes Michael Byrne as being one of the mutineers. The poor fellow was almost blind. He didn't know what was going on. Everyone was going crazy on a ship. He could hardly mutiny, could he? So in 1791, they sent this ship called the Pandora to hunt down the remaining mutineers in Tahiti, but on its way back, it sank near the Great Barrier Reef, killing quite a few of those on board. So a lot of the mutineers died anyway. But then a few of them did make it back to England, one of whom was Michael Byrne, the fiddler, the blind fiddler, and he got let off. I think only about 2 people hanged for the mutiny anyway in the end.
Some of us were hanged, some of us set free. Pandora, Pandora, the witch of the sea.
It didn't feel that long ago when Canary Wharf was the only skyscraper, but now they're all just smothered in a cacophony of...
It looks like Chicago, doesn't it?
Imagine this full of ships, tall ships with square sails
amazing. Yeah.
all around here.
You can see the tall ship with the square sails over there, look.
Oh yes, well there's a Cutty Sark. Oh, but over here, look, Tsar Peter the Great. There he is. And apparently he was very tall. He was apparently about sort of 6'7". So,
why has he got a pin head?
yes, I don't know why he's got such a small head. More to the point, I don't know whether he really had a dwarf as well. I'm not quite sure what this dwarf is doing here. Now, back in 1698, Tsar Peter the Great headed over to England and stayed here in order to learn about shipbuilding because our techniques were so advanced. And he stayed with that fella John Evelyn at Sayes Court that we were talking about early on. But apparently, he was a very bad guest. John Evelyn writes, June 9th, 1698, I went to Deptford to view how miserably the Tsar of Muscovy had left my house after 3 months making it his court. Having got Sir Christopher Wren, His Majesty's surveyor, and Mr. London, his gardener, to go down and make an estimate of the repairs. Yeah, and apparently he liked to get incredibly drunk and get wheeled around the garden in a wheelbarrow and ruin the geraniums.
So the property owner got Christopher Wren over, a builder, to get a quote.
Got any builders? You know any builders? Yeah, well.
Chris will do it.
Now, by 1889, the East India Company had vacated this area, and these landing stages, all these abandoned things here, were used to bring coal and stuff up here to what was the world's largest power station, built by Sebastian de Ferranti, who sounds Italian but was from Liverpool actually. And Ferranti had 400 kilowatt alternators in his power station here, sending 10,000 volts of alternating current right into London to light it up. 10,000 gigawatts, Marty!
She was a lady that no man could leave. She had a few dirty tricks up her sleeve.
Look at these spooky skulls with crossbones. They're amazing. Legend has it Captain Morgan used these as the inspiration for the Jolly Roger ensign. I applied to be him in an ad. They didn't choose me. But yeah, apparently this is where they got the idea from, because the original pirates, they had a black and white flag, but they weren't skulls and crossbones. One of them was a skeleton with someone running him through or something like that. But it then develops into being the skull and crossbones from St. Nicholas Church here in Deptford.
And actually, these two were put there because there used to be this building where they used to keep the bones.
Charnel House.
Charnel House, that's it, yeah, Charnel House, yeah. And then that's just to represent it because it was all knocked down, that Charnel House.
Somewhere around this side, which is the west wall, is the grave of George Chevlock. Now, have you ever heard the expression, oh, it was a bit of an albatross around my neck? Now, you know where that comes from? So that's from the rhyme of the Ancient Mariner, meaning because that started when this captain, George Chevlock, captain of the Speedwell, he was trying to round Cape Horn, and they got scared by this bird that kept following them around, and there was this albatross, and one of the sailors shot the albatross, and he was made to wear the albatross around his neck as a sort of a punishment for having shot it and brought them all this bad luck. And he told this story to Samuel Taylor Coleridge, who wrote the rhyme of the Ancient Mariner. And I don't know, he originally had one of these chest tombs, but it says that it's been removed, but it was by the west wall. So I wonder if it was this one here. God save the ancient mariner from the fiends that plague thee thus. Why look'st thou so with my crossbow? I shot the albatross. Ah, well a day, what evil looks had I from old and young? Instead of the cross, the albatross about my neck was hung.
Pandora, Pandora, the witch of the sea.
In 1593, Christopher Marlowe was buried here. Christopher Marlowe was one of the most famous playwrights. So they say that he even inspired William Shakespeare.
Some people even think that he wrote Shakespeare's plays.
I don't believe that. Was this the face that launched 1,000 ships and burnt the topless towers of Ilium? Sweet Helen, make me immortal with a kiss. He was accused, amongst many things, it was claimed that he was an atheist, a homosexual, and worse still, a Catholic. And the famous double agent and informer at the time, Richard Baines, even accused Marlowe of saying that Christ was a bastard and bedfellow of St. John, and leaned always in his bosom. He used him as the sinners of Sodom.
Okay.
Now, you could get hanged for that kind of thing back then, but even now I feel quite bad even saying it in a graveyard. So please forgive me for quoting it. I'm just reading. I mean no disrespect. Eventually he was murdered in a house down here.
Aged only 27. Quite weird that the most famous playwright just got buried in an unmarked grave. And then the guy that murdered him went to prison and just sat there for 28 days waiting for the Queen to pardon him, which he did.
I told the wenches far away,
Hey ho, melodies,
who blow your hornpipe night to day.
But behind this big wall here, that's where Evelyn House was, the one that I keep going on about, where John Evelyn lived and where the Czar of Russia stayed. They then had a big meat market behind there in Victorian times, and this whole area was filled with poverty. In fact, Charles Booth, the social reformer who wrote about it, he writes in 1899, south along Watergate Street, cattle market wall on west side. Faint fetid smell prevails, overpowered in places by disgusting stenches. Rough women, one with head bandaged, others with blank eyes, one old harridan sitting on a doorstep with a dirty clay pipe, shoeless children. The sort of people
He knew me well.
Yes, how did he know? Look, stretcher railings. These railings. These were stretchers from the Second World War. Because of the war effort, they had to remove all the metal and stuff around London, but it was required for bombs and God knows what, and weapons. This would be the handle, and that's where they laid them on the floor. Because they were made out of metal, they were easily sterilised in the event of some sort of gas attack or chemical attack. So they removed all these railings and everything, and then they turned them into things like stretchers. But then after the war, they couldn't be bothered to turn them back into railings again because they already looked like they could do the job like this. That's my guess. I don't know. Let's go to the pub.
They call me Jolly Roger, and now you know the reason why.
hey ho, shiver me mate, the sailor till I die.
Cheers, Louisa. Cheers. Simon, nice to be back. And thanks. If you enjoy the videos, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. It really makes a big difference and it doesn't cost anything. So just hit the subscribe button. It makes me look good. And also, pretty please, with a cherry on top, could you follow me on my new Instagram, which is @JoolzGuidesOfficial. See you next time.
Hey ho, shiver me